kind of bulungi somewhere somehow, but they were never formal. That moved up to the early 50s as we come towards independence, where we now see a lot of what came as formal NGOs, but they came along faith. They were mainly Christians. So you had the faith, the church, like Church of the Anglican Church. Then it wasn't Church of Uganda, I think it was Church of England. The Roman Catholic and the rest. But then in the 50s, those very institutions started what came to be NGOs then. You'll find like the Roman Church might be a school, which is, but most of those entities were coming from out. They were just coming into the country. And that has a reason why it came that way, because real recognition of NGOs in the world and their role comes after World War II, which is 1945. And the UN declaration, remember the Red Cross and its role in World War I and World War II, that's when they realized that they are non-government players who can be important. So the real, even at international level, the real NGOs start working around then. Now in Uganda, they started doing provision of charity, but not doing so much. It was not until the 1970s that we start seeing NGOs taking a center stage, mainly in providing charity, because there were wars here and there. So we have NGOs providing charity and all that. And that was heightened with the Luero War, 1980 to 86. So that's when the role of NGOs really became paramount, because they were providing a lot of relief during the war. And I think it's because of that which informs the law that gets made once this government comes into power. Because this government comes into power in 1996, and 2 years later, they make the first law to regulate NGOs. That is the 1989 NGO registration statute. Now, you need to note its name. It is NGO registration. And it wasn't meant to create NGOs. It was meant to register existing NGOs. Which means that as an NGO, you needed to exist, you needed to be regulated somewhere else, incorporate somewhere else, and get registered into this club, which would make you an NGO. That's why that law of 1989, which continued in two force up to 2016, did not provide for incorporation of NGOs. It only provided for registration of NGOs. And that was one of the gaps that NGOs had. But it also provided quite a number of stringent issues. For example, NGOs needed permits. There were no permits prior to that. NGOs needed permits to work in the community. And it also said NGOs must cooperate with government. So the first provision for NGOs to cooperate with government comes in with that law. Fast forward, that law, because it had issues, NGOs advocated and kept advocating for reform of the law, and until you move up to page 4. Kept advocating for reform of the law until 2006. That's when we see the first NGO amendment to the NGO Act. No, you've gone too far. Amendment to the NGO Act. The amendment to the NGO Act, that is the 2006, introduced a number of interesting things. One is that NGOs now were given ability to incorporate, which never existed. So now you could incorporate. So you could incorporate and register within the same system. because prior to that, you would incorporate somewhere else, like register of companies or trustees, and then come to NGO Bureau and register. 2006, they said the first thing, you cannot incorporate anywhere unless you have permission from the NGO Bureau. That was the first thing they brought in 2006, which meant if we, as we are seated here, we wanted to start an NGO, we would just first go to the NGO board, then it was called NGO board, seek permission that we want to start an NGO, and they say, okay, here is a letter, go ahead. Today, today our maximum permit is 5 years. It's just an improvement of the old, which was saying, as a must, you begin with 1, then we give you 3, then we give you 5. So the change that came later just said you can go straight away for 5. But then previously it would be 1, 3, and then 5. The other thing that law introduced, which is quite strange, yeah, we are there. The other thing that law introduced, which is quite strange, is it said you cannot contact any rural community in Uganda without permission from the RDC. That was quite restrictive. So it said NGOs in Uganda cannot contact the rural community, and it didn't say train or what, it said contact. So we don't know what that should have meant. You cannot contact the rural community without permission from RDC. So it meant if you want to organize, now I don't know if Gulu is rural or if Mbale is rural. Nowadays we have Mbale City and Mbale Town. But it meant if you wanted to organize a workshop in Mbale, you needed permission from the RDC, who would look at your concept note and say, yeah, it's okay, go ahead and have this in Mbale. It was hardly practiced, but it's one of those things which was quite a problem then. Now, when that was in 2006, and then 2010, we make the NGO policy. When you read the policy, because it's one of those things we are going to review, when you read the policy, it has those interesting provisions. On overall, the policy was meant to have a smooth relation between NGOs and government, which means whoever was drafting that policy was seeing there is no smooth relationship. Is trying to tell you, yeah, maybe you guys have been fighting, now let's make a policy to cease fire. If you look at the overall policy overall objective of the policy. And because of that background, so we make laws that implement the policy, but the laws are more like we need to cease fire with these guys. So the laws that subsequently come. And the law that subsequently came, you could be scrolling because I'm summarizing quite a lot of text in here. The law that subsequently came is the 2016 NGO Act, which is in force today. So the 2016 NGO Act was aimed at implementing the 2010 NGO policy. The policy had got a number of quite interesting things. For example, one of the things the policy provided for is that the policy does not regulate faith-based organizations. And that became a challenge because the definition of faith-based organizations was that any organization that deals with faith. Now, we need to pause here. Unfortunately for us lawyers, they say we split hairs when we are talking with words. Now, there are so many faith-based organizations in this country. You might have a faith-based organizations whose mandate is to provide evangelism. You have Kakande's ministry, I don't know what it's called. It's to provide evangelism. Or you might have, okay, let's say to establish a church. Prior to that time and up to now, if you want to start a church, you incorporate a company limited by guarantee, and you're most likely going to register with the NGO Bureau as an NGO. Then you run your church. Then there are faith-based organizations which are commercial, totally commercial. Centenary Bank. It's a faith-based organization. That's all. It's totally commercial. Then there are faith-based organizations which do not provide evangelism, which are not commercial, and are what the rest of you would call NGOs. Caritas, ADRA, World Vision, Compassion International. There are quite many. So when the law gave a blanket statement that they will not regulate faith-based organizations, it was not clear whether they will not regulate the churches or the NGOs whose basis is faith, like ADRA, Caritas, Muslim Medical Council, name it, or the businesses. But we all know, so the debate has always been between those which provide evangelism and those which provide this. The other thing that the policy brought in, which is problematic, was to cluster NGOs into what they were defining. So they defined NGOs regional, indigenous is if you are all Ugandans. Regional is if you are Ugandans plus someone from the East African community. At that time, the East African community had 3 countries. Today, it has quite more. Then they said continental, if it's made up of citizens and or people from Africa other than those from the East African community. Then they brought in one which I don't know the difference up to now. Foreign and international. I don't know the difference between those two. I've read the text, but I can't tell the difference. International NGOs and foreign NGOs. Because the definition says if they are made up of people who come from outside Africa. But it's not clear when they become foreign and when they become international. It's a bit hard. But what does that mean? It meant if CCG, as it is today, is made up of Uganda, and Peter is appointed on the board of CCG, and Peter is South African, CCG becomes continental, despite the fact that it has never worked outside Uganda's territory. So if CCG puts on its board Peter, who is American, it becomes one of those two, either international or foreign. I don't know the difference. So there was like an alienation of NGOs for as long as you have foreign entities. And a lot of times people come and say, I've started my NGO here, I incorporated here, why am I being called foreign? It's that, it came from the NGO policy. It also has an effect on how much you pay later, as we shall see. Then, of course, the policy brought in 2 other headaches. One, the policy says the NGOs will be regulated under Ministry of Internal Affairs. So the debate with NGOs is that we provide social services. So ideally we should be under Ministry of Gender or Ministry of Justice. Because Ministry of Internal Affairs deals with security, it deals with prisons. Okay. The other departments in that ministry, we have a department for NGOs. The other department is police, prisons, and immigration. So we are basically a square peg in a round hole. We are in and probably that explains why a lot of times our regulators don't even understand us, because we are in a totally different location. But that comes from the policy. So when the act which came to enforce the policy is made, the policy was made in 2010, the present act is made in 2016 to enforce the policy. So the definition of a minister in the act is minister in charge of internal affairs, because the policy located us in internal affairs. And when you read the Act, it also has those provisions, those definitions of who foreign, indigenous, international NGO, blah, 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 blah. The policy also puts in place different roles of different players. And one role I want to highlight is the role of local governments. So the policy says NGOs must work with local governments, and it is must. So when it says must work with local governments, it put up the District NGO Monitoring Committee. It comes from the policy, and now we have District NGO Monitoring Committee everywhere, every district. So the policy says they will work together. When the law comes out later, the law provides that you get permission from the District NGO Monitoring Committee, recommendation to get a permit or a certificate. You sign an MOU with them. Those come now later in the law. Then you file returns to them. Blah, blah, blah. The challenge with that is I cannot criticize the District NGO Monitoring Committee, which is headed by the CAO. I cannot criticize them because they won't give me my MOU. So if my permit is about to expire, I have to be as good as so that my MOU is well, they brought in other things. But one thing you should notice is they brought in layers after layers of regulation, of control. So the first layer is before you go to work, before you get a permit, go to the sub-county and go to the district and they approve you. The second layer is you must sign an MOU with them, which means even if you have a 5-year permit saying you work nationwide, if the district says don't come, what happens? The permit is useless. Because the way the law is designed is we give you a permit to work nationwide, but you must have an MOU with the district. So if in your report you criticize the CAO for being corrupt, and the CAO says, sorry, no MOU. So despite your permit, chances are that you work. So there was increased direct control through the policy and the regulations. Now, that was that. You have to file returns to the District Technical Committee, file returns to the District NGO Monitoring Committee, and to the Sub-County Monitoring Committee. Despite the fact that the District NGO Monitoring Committee and the District Technical Committee are headed by the CAO. But where you have to file 2 sets of returns to the same person is, well, I don't know. But that's how it's designed. But the whole design is about how the control is. Because if you go by the letter of the law, you should be filing returns in each district where you work and in each you work. So if you work in districts, those are 10 times. So those are pieces of documents to be submitted every year to the districts. On top of that, you have to submit the same amount of documents to the NGO Bureau and to URSB. And as we were still there, they introduced the Anti-Money Laundering Act, which also has the same requirements. And as we are still there, they introduced the Data Protection Act, which also adds things. And so that has been the context through which we've been operating. Now, when you look at that context, I've tried to limit it to basically the legal. I've not talked about the other environments that you find yourselves in. Because the other environment you will find yourself in is you're going to get an MOU from the district, and the district is going to tell you pets to facilitate the cow. In my other assessment, it has nothing to do with this one. In my other assessment, we realized you need a minimum of 5 million to be able to have the work ready. Now, that minimum of 5 million all goes to government people somewhere. Of course, the other context you operate in is no donor is that money. So the donor puts up a call and he says, to qualify for this grant, attach a permit, attach this certificate, attach the other one. How you got it, it's not their business. Their interest is just attach these ones. Whether you had money to get them, not their business. Then you find that actually this side of the law is controlling NGOs. The other side, the donors have walked into the same trap. I remember a few years back, there was a donor who put up a call and said, by the time we sign an agreement with you, you must have a tax exemption certificate from URA. Me, I've worked on tax exemptions. I've made several applications, more than 10. And I've only had less than 2% of the exemptions. The certificates have been issued when they are still valid. Most times you'll get the exemption certificate when the time you applied for has passed. Because they give 2 years, they will take 2 years to process the system and issue the certificate when it has already expired. But also remember, if they are going to take 2 years and the donor has put up a call and he says, by the time we sign an agreement, you must have this certificate, definitely you'll be knocked out because you won't have it within that period. Yeah. So that is the other context. I have not discussed that context. Maybe we might discuss it in this paper or not, but that's the other context. So this is the context that this assessment is going to be based on. And this assessment is going to look at what are the trends and the impacts of this law. Now, as we were trying to do this, as recent as 3 days back, the amendment to the NGO Act, another amendment, came into force. The rationalization. I guess many of you have heard about rationalization. So the rationalization came into force. And I know many of us have not understood what it's about. It's a rather strange thing when you look at how they did rationalization. They abolished the NGO Bureau without abolishing it, because what they did, in the old law, we had the NGO Bureau, and the structure of the NGO Bureau was we had the board of the NGO Bureau. Below the board was a secretariat and staff. So we had the board, we had the executive director, below executive director was a secretary, and below the secretary was were the staff, and it was semi-independent. What has been introduced is this. They abolished the board of the NGO Bureau, but kept the people who occupied the position of the board as NGO Bureau. Are you confused? Or you've understood? Okay, let me repeat. We had an NGO Bureau which had a board. Now they abolished the board and said, but the Bureau will stay, and it will be headed by these people. So the old law was saying, there is a Bureau. 1. 2, the Bureau is headed by the board. 3, the board is composed of. The new change says, we've abolished the board. We are keeping the Bureau. The Bureau is headed by the following. So the same number of people who were the board are heading the Bureau. Ahead and say, abolishing the position of executive director of the Bureau, which has been abolished. And then they kept the position of the secretary to the Bureau, and many, many other changes. Now, one thing you need to note, if for those online, if you're in office, check your certificate or your permit and see. It is signed by the executive director of the NGO Bureau, a position which has been abolished. So the law has said those whose certificates and permits had been issued before 1st of this month, those permits will continue to exist. You get? Those to be issued from first moving forward, they are going to be under the new law. Which means if the one you have in office is signed by the executive director, if your permit has expired like right about now, your new permit is going to look different. I don't know how it's going to look like. But what I know is a process to amend the NGO regulations. You remember I told you that when we are doing this literature, we realize we have to review the regulations. Now, a process to amend the regulations has begun, where they will now provide, I don't know what they will provide, but two possible scenarios will happen. Either because the new law says the Bureau will issue you with the certificates. So we might have a situation where the certificates are issued by the NGO Bureau, which means the person to sign on that certificate will be the chairperson of the Bureau and the secretary. That's the position we had before 2016, where certificates would be signed by the chairperson of the board and the secretary. The danger with that is actually not even that, before I go to that. The option two, the first option, it is signed by two. Second option, where the secretary. The danger with this change is that your certificates, your permits, your whatever has been issued by the executive director, now they have to be issued by the Bureau. The Bureau is going to be sitting a minimum of 4 times in a year. Which means when you apply today, you have to wait until. So when you sit, you have to pray and be lucky you are on the agenda of the day. And also pray and be lucky that you are issued, because if it's queried, you'll go through the process and line up again. You get? Because before this rationalization, you would apply and these people sit in office every day so they could look. Now, we had a backlog. The backlog we had for NGOs was the shortest NGO we've documented having gotten a permit took them 3 months, the shortest period. The longest took them like 2 years. But the backlog is about, average it's 4 to 12 months to get your document. For an entity where people were sitting in office every day. We are not sure how long it's going to take you, where the people have to sit 4 times a year. I don't know, but you see how, yeah. Of course, all that is not written the way I'm explaining. I'm using much more words for us to understand. So it's going to take us slightly longer than usual to get this. What makes it even slightly longer, this is outside this paper, but something also just for the context, is that the Bureau has been given a slot of 35 staff members from the present, let me see. Okay, the board which has been removed had approved 93 positions, but they could only be able to get 76 people. So that Bureau has been working with 76 people, permanent, and between 20 and 25 temporary to fill the gap. Now they've been given a slot of 35. So they'll have a maximum of 35 staff members. I'm not sure if this will better the service provision or worsen it, but I don't want to speculate. I want to leave it to what will happen. Yeah, so that is now the rationalization. Of course, this rationalization of the Bureau is meant to save funds. The other thing, when we looked through the rationalization, as we are still doing the literature, we found something strange, is that the justification for rationalization, which I think everyone knows, is that government said they want to avoid the duplication of resources, of services, like there were several government entities providing service. The other one was they wanted to avoid, to cut costs. When we look into duplication, there was no other NGO bureau or any other person doing what NGO bureau. I don't know anyone who was issuing permits or NGO certificates. So I don't see duplication. Of course, this doesn't mean that the NGO bureau was an angel. It was, the way it handled NGOs was terrible. But then we need to face the reality of what is on paper. So that was one which we find is strange with the rationalization. The other thing which is strange is that the bureau was, the government says was saving funds, and from yesterday, was yesterday or the other day, the government is going to spend, is it 25 billion on rationalization? Yeah, I think it was in yesterday or the other day's papers. It's going to spend 25 billion to rationalize. So I'm not sure if that has achieved much. But that's the context we are working in. Now, what methodology do we intend to use? Okay, I didn't talk about all this, but let me first talk about it as well before I move to the methodology. So, against all that legal background is this, where we've had a number of NGOs being closed. Many of you know the 56 because the media concentrated on the 56. But there are much more. Let me give you examples of CAF. In 2019, let me see, 13, 2016 election, yeah, 2013. So in 2013, the OPM, no, before OPM, in 2013, they introduced what they called validation. You remember validation? Which is a new layer of things NGOs have to do. So when they introduced the validation, the minister went out, they had validated around 1,000 NGOs. And the minister made a press statement and said, these are the valid NGOs. Anyone who is not among these ones, RDCs, hotels, close, don't allow them. That meant close to 10,000 others were thrown out. It was followed shortly, because the validation thing happened in August. Then in September, the OPM sent out a notice, and I think about 1,000 NGOs working in, I don't have the actual figures, but they are in this write-up, working in refugees were chased from refugee camps for having invalid MOUs with OPM. Now please note, I told you earlier on that you need a permit. So you have a permit which says you can work in refugee camps. And you have an MOU with the district which says you can work in the refugee camp in the district. Then OPM came and said, you also need an MOU with me so that you can work in the refugee camp. So, like layers after layers. Now, you have to fulfill each of those MOUs, what it's saying. And OPM wakes up one day, says, no, you leave the camp, you don't have MOUs with us. So your MOU with the district wouldn't help. Your permit, which says you can work anywhere in the country, wouldn't help. So that was the OPM. Then it was followed, I think, by, that's when they raided GLEAS and Action Aid and Uhuru, the three. And then I remember when we responded and said this is illegal, what, spoke a lot of English. They said, okay, we want these people submit documents to the Bureau. They wrote a letter and they submitted. And then after that, someone leaked a document where the FIA was investigating 13 NGOs. It included quite a number of them. I remember Hurinet, AKU, NGO Forum, Pastor Kakande's ministry, a number of them. Then we moved from there. We came to the 38, said these guys are promoting homosexuality, permits cancelled. Then we moved from there, we moved to the 50, no, before the 50 that, we first banned 5, which were accused of cheating. Then they banned 8, which were accused of forging documents, and then the forging documents and homosexuality, and then the 30-something. After those 30-something, then they came to SMAG, which is very recent. SMAG was last year. Yeah, I think SMAG and the rest. But when you see, look at it, you need to step aside and look at it how they did. There's a narrative NGOs are bad. They promote homosexuality. So when they ban your NGO, alongside the one they have accused of promoting homosexuality, the community will understand. Because they will say, these guys, they are promoting immorality, so serves them right. When they come and say, you've not filed returns, your donor won't understand. Because what I've found is that the donor will say, but this is what the law says. Why haven't you met it? You get? Like, why haven't you fulfilled the law? It says have an MOU. So why were you operating without one? So you find yourself alone in that context. So then, of course, we have this broad discretion. If you read the Act and the things, you'll see where they say, as the Bureau might deem fit. How they deem fit. That's why you wake up today, the Bureau says, permit, attach minutes of your meeting. And like, minutes of my meeting are private. Says, attach the minutes, plus the attendance list signed by every member who attended that meeting. Because the law says they can request anything they deem fit. Because they have unfettered discretion to ask for those. Then the other things that they've done is this. Now, this is not in the Act. High fees is not in the Act. NGO fees regulations. The belief was NGOs have a lot of fees. And I can tell you, as someone who worked on these regulations, I was part of the team which drafted these regulations. The fees were like much, much higher than what you're seeing today. But if you work without a permit, you are fined 2 million per month, which means if you forgot about your permit for 6 months, you need to pay government 12 million. You have a donor willing to give you 12 million to pay to government. You can see the fees. Or, okay, that's not the bad one. Now, the law we are not going to review under here. You've all heard about beneficial ownership laws. How many of us have beneficial owners registers? I see 1, 2, okay, 3. If you don't have a beneficial owners register, there is a fine. It's 500,000 shillings per day. Yeah, it's per day. Just like if you've not filed your, I think the fine on AGM is also about 50,000 shillings per day. Yeah, little 50 per day, but I can tell you, me as someone who has worked with NGOs, they are those since they existed 20 years. They've never had a single AGM. So, yeah, that's what the Companies Act says. Fine of 50,000 shillings. So, they put fees, which actually, some of us who work on the other side, there are NGOs which we've told, please, let's wind up. Yeah, you have a wind-up clause in your documents. Government is demanding a debt of 60 million. Your net worth is, no, you have 2 desktop computers, 2 desks, and 3 chairs. That's your net worth. So, what do? We just wind up, because it's impossible. But that's what government wants. It wants everyone to wind up and go home. You won't afford our fees? Please go home. If you know what happened recently when URSB banned all those who hadn't filed returns, they were about 250,000 companies. Out of the 250,000, me personally, I know about 600 NGOs. Like I did a run of NGOs. They are state now because we are not their legal counsel, so we couldn't do much. But then you might find maybe half of those are no longer because of what happened. Now, that was the issue with the fees, and that's how we've gone around reducing the space with the fees. Then the documentation. I've already talked about the documentation. You need really document after document. You submit your memorandum and articles and all these, then they say, we need your work plan. Submit your work plan, they say, we need your budget. Submit your budget, they say, we need your sources of funding. Then they say, we need your minutes of the meeting. Then we need those who attended. We need their national IDs. We need, like, it keeps growing, like you need a whole library. Like, I think if Malema Birizi was operating an NGO, probably one day he would show up with a trailer full of books and says, hey, I've come to submit my my documents, because that's what it is. So, but you know what this does? You would spend a lot of your time on documents, you know? Document after document after document after document. Then, yep. So, now, that's how we are operating. But under this research, because this is still research in progress, please go up to the methodology. These are some of the things we have, captured from reading, from desk review, from the basic, the inception. And we are meant to go to do more research, so the methodology will involve desk review. We've already done some desk review. The act, the regulations, the policy. Then we shall have some focus group discussions. Go down. We shall have some focus group discussions. We are planning to have 4 of them. They might be online, and we wish to call upon you to, when the time comes, probably you can participate in these discussions, and we highlight these things. As you can see, I might be, after reading a document, I say this is what happens, but then you might find what your experience is different, and that experience can be very helpful in building this up. So we'll have focus group discussion. Of course, we shall have the data analysis. We've already started the data analysis. And we shall have the writing of the report, which we've already started, but it's work in progress. After all this, we shall have a validation, where we will maybe have a meeting like this, and we come and discuss the findings. Then we have people's input to say maybe what you found is true or false. Then we make adjustments. Now, all this is done with the aim of getting out a piece of paper that is acceptable, that we agree with things in it, so we can use those issues for advocacy for reform. Now, talking about advocacy for reform, two things are happening. They were meant to happen sometime back. They've not yet happened because of rationalization. They are reviewing, the NGO policy is going to be reviewed, and the NGO Act is going to be reviewed. So expect a new policy and expect a new act. But as NGOs, we've not had what we call impact assessment, NGO policy impact assessment, NGO Act impact assessment. We don't know what impact the laws that are going to be reviewed are going to have had on us. Now, we might be called, or we may not, normally it's the not, which normally happens, to input in the policy and in the act, the processes of making. And we believe, CCG believes that if we do this well, it will inform your ability to input in that coming process. You get me? Because the process is coming, it had been put on hold because of the rationalization, and now they are going to review the act and the policy. But if someone knocked on your door today and says, what do you want to change in the policy? Are there things in you? Do you have like 3 things you feel can be changed? You would be like, I need to first read it. So what we are trying to do in this process is that if we get consensus on the issues, then it could help us advocate for moving forward, the policy, the legal system, to see how it will change. Okay, so that's the mambo jumbo of the Inception report. Hope it makes sense to those who are listening in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Peter. I think you deserve more than just that. Let's do better. Thank you very much. This is quite comprehensive, and I must say I saw a lot of people taking notes. This is like putting us in class, and there's definitely a lot of learning that has taken place. Just to let you know, we're having a working tea, so please feel free, walk over there and get yourself something, grab a bite, and then you can come back and sit as we continue with the discussion. I think we can just proceed to the plenary discussions. Also, we are streaming this conversation live on Civic Space TV. You could also check and subscribe and follow, and you can also follow this conversation later on the same space. So I think it's now time for us to open the floor to your feedback or comments or questions to Council Peter. Chris, I see a hand up already. We are just hold on. Let's give you the mic. Yes, Chris.
Okay. Peter. Actually, Peter did not emphasize the objectives of whereas he emphasized methodology, he emphasized the objectives. But I want to thank Peter for a very rich content that he has managed to put up as a basis of discussion on the present NGO context. My proposal to the paper, is that Peter should consider having a conceptual framework, because I have already, from his explanation of the entire paper, you already realize that as a country conceptually, we first of all don't understand what NGOs are. For example, NGOs is about freedom of association, right? So I would want us to approach this from very strong conceptual grounding, like freedom of association, freedom of participation. And I think from that point, we can have government buy-in, because they know that this is about citizens' freedom to associate, which is guaranteed under Article 29 of the Constitution. So I think if we approach it conceptually from that angle, it would be very easy because we also need government to understand the importance of freedom of association and the importance of NGOs, because the vilification of NGOs is because our lawmakers are also not conceptually grounded on these issues. I am going to tell you one thing. Do you know that the alternative of NGOs are actually rebel groups? That is the alternative of NGOs. And you read Farid Zakaria on illiberal civil societies. What Farid Zakaria argues is that when you look at, for example, let us take a case study of Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, because you close the space for citizens to organize formally in form of NGOs, in form of political parties, in form of citizen associations. They will now organize illiberally. Nature, by the way, abhors a vacuum. Whether you like it or not, human beings are social animals. They always come together and promote a collective cause. Now, that is how you have Al-Qaeda, because the context is not open for people to form NGOs, and so they will do underground organization. That is how you have the Muslim brotherhoods. So I think if we approach it from these aspects and let government also understand that, you see, organizing through NGOs is such a good thing, because the absence of this organization will actually be a more perverse form of citizen organizing, which is in form of rebellion. So actually NGOs government should actually look at NGOs as their friends, because in any case they even complement government efforts in checking them, because this idea of trying to say that you're closing the space is also a very negative perspective, because government should realize that they don't have all the answers, they don't have all the solutions, and why these NGOs exist is to backstop their work, tell them where they are going wrong, and also they actually need to understand that it is part of a broader role of citizens to play their social accountability role in a social contract arrangement, which is government.
Thank
so
you.
me, I think that I think Peter should consider that conceptual approach. Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking note of that. I'm sure he's also taking note of that. Could we have another feedback? Somebody else wants to chip in? Or we give you a few moments to reflect. You want to stretch a little bit? Okay. Rita, do you have comments from our participants who are joining us online?
Can I add something as some people raise, as you wait for others to raise their hands? Yeah. Then there is another thing also that I noticed from Peter's presentation, which I think he should link it in 1989 NGO registration. I think this year is of very important significance, because remember that is also when we had the liberal democracy wave. Yeah, the liberal democracy wave. So it would also be important for them to inquire further if this NGO, because this is the first time we see an NGO legislation, could it also be because of the liberal democracy wave? And then that will also be important in also understanding the context yeah,
Context at that time.
yes, the context at that time.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I can see a contribution. Oh, let me just move the mic. I think my team is a little engaged. Let's start with you, and then we'll hear from the rest.
All right. Thank you so much. Peter, thank you for the well thought out but also clear presentation that you make. Mine really complements what the previous member submitted. And maybe it may not necessarily fit into the current context, but you notice that we've been reactionary right from the start. You find that most of these things either catch us unaware, but also we seem to have a very understanding in light of what the state has in mind and how it perceives us as the civil society and the NGO sector. And so my thinking would be, would there be either a segment or a projection after the assessment of all this, of where we've been, where we are at today? What would it look like in the coming days, especially understanding the political landscape and the projected future? This partly to enable us prepare, but also provide a sort of buffer that civil society organizations may want to take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, very insightful, and I just want to add or mention first a clear context. Changes that have happened in the NGO law, the rationalization of the Bureau. We need to think about the implication of this, especially with the political season that we are in and what that implies. We're just a few months away into elections, and as we all know, especially those that are in the governance work, you know or understand how the law has been utilized to stifle efforts of civil society or NGOs to participate in the electoral process. You want to understand how complex it's been, for instance, or how complex it will be for anyone to try to renew their permit right now, between now and the electoral time, especially if yet you need a valid permit to be accredited to, for instance, participate in election observation. And now, NGOs across the country have always found it tricky for many reasons and at different layers. At the district with the DNMCs, and even in Kampala at the Bureau. Now the Bureau is back to the ministry. How simpler would that be for an NGO X in Kotido or NGO Y in Kisoro trying to renew their permit in this period? And now with that change, what implication will that have? The other bit, we've had issues in the way, in the location of the Bureau, because the practice is that every NGO across the country, for you to register or to renew your permit, you have to file in Kampala. And now the Bureau has been working, and Peter, you highlight this quite well, a bigger team. Now the team is reducing. They had more time now to a minimum of just 4. It's worth investigating how this will, really, either this will support or hinder the operations of the sector in terms of bringing the services of the Bureau closer to the people. Because in the past, the conversation was taking the route of trying to distribute the service across, and I don't know if the services of the Bureau will be available at the different points Ministry of Internal Affairs is to be able to and access services of the Bureau at that point, because that will in a way bring the services closer to the consumers. The final bit is that I think the law should really try to streamline is the issue of the operationalizations of the DNMCs. As NGO Forum in the past, we've conducted some work on trying to understand the operationalization of DNMCs. And our findings were that in many districts, these DNMCs are not functional. Even some members of the committee, who is part of that committee, who chairs it, some people in the districts don't know about this. In fact, for some districts, the RDC has become the chair of the DNMC, not what the law says. So this is one part that has affected, and it is even harder for national NGOs. How many districts would you sign MOUs with if you are the Uganda National NGO Forum? When your office is situated in Kampala, but you have operations across the country, is it how tough can that be to sign over 140 MOUs with districts across the country? So I feel that the law, in aspects like those, should be streamlined much better, and would be glad to hear the findings that Peter and the team will find on aspects like this. Thank you very much.
I think there was a hand somewhere around here. Again? If would you like to speak again? No, if not, Peter, I don't know if you'd like to respond quickly to some of the comments that have come through, then we open to another round.
I guess I can respond from here. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. The conceptual framework, I think that's a good input. We will consider it and see how we can move with that. Then the issue on context. You see, the context for NGOs, you can or a whole research on its own about how the operating context is, and we really understand the challenges, the practical challenges of getting permit and the rest. Some of that might fall outside our scope. And that falls into what someone said when NGOs are more reactionary. One of the things to avoid being reactionary, for example, is research where we are trying to say maybe we need to do an assessment before the policy review has happened so that we understand how it affects us. Then when the policy review happens, we have something to provide. But also, you need to note that the NGO Bureau for years has been planning to digitalize, and I think it's the only government institution in terms of the ones that NGOs deal with. It's the only institution that hasn't digitalized. And because it hasn't digitalized, it means if you're in Kabong, you have to travel all the way to Kampala to submit a document, and if you get bounced, you have to travel again. You might make several trips in between. I think it takes about a day and a half for someone to travel from Kabong to Kampala. So you can imagine that might mean a week. Just travel document. You travel on Monday, you reach Tuesday afternoon, submit on Wednesday, travel back, you get back to your office on Friday. So because the whole thing has to be physical. So the digitalizing of things might help. But also we just need to be alert. How do they digitalize the things? And what does it mean? That would fall outside the scope of this, but of this study. But it's something NGO leaders need to pay attention to, because sometimes digitalizing in this country does not necessarily mean better service. For the lawyers will tell you what we experienced when the Ministry of Lands digitalized. It used to take us a month to process something, and it moved to about 3 months. And every time the officers will tell you, we are still learning the system. And up to now, some of them are still learning the system, despite that new things have come up. So that is that. There are quite a number of things about operationalizing the DNMCs and the SNMCs. And one of the things we've noticed, even as we do this desk review, is that it seems government set up so many things that even itself, it failed to fulfill them in the law. For example, the law sets up a district NGO monitoring committee at every district, sub-county NGO monitoring committee at every sub-county. This is 2016, it's when the law came into force. This is 8 years down the road. They still cannot implement even what they themselves promised to do. Setting up of DNMCs and SNMCs is not work of NGOs, it's government work. It's government responsibility. And government has failed. And probably, we never know when we come to recommendation. Maybe we might need to recommend that they do away with some of these things if they themselves cannot put them in place. Because if they themselves have failed to put these things in place, how do they expect NGOs to work? But it's also, on the other side, you might need to think it might also be a strategy to make work hard for you. So you'll go to the DNMC and it doesn't work, it doesn't exist, and yet they are telling you, for you to get your permit, you must get a letter from them. The other thing I've seen practically, still outside the scope of this work, is every time you go to the DNMC, they say you facilitate our meeting. So it has indirectly promoted corruption. They will say facilitate a council meeting or whatever meeting. And government knows these are happening. I've lost count the number of times we've been in meetings with the NGO Bureau, and people have risen this issue of corruption facilitating DNMCs, but they've done nothing. So it's outside the scope of this study, but it's something to consider. It's something for us to talk about. The only thing that can be in the scope of this study is to say the law establishes these institutions, and these institutions 8 years down the road, they've not worked, or they've acted against what they had been envisaged to do, and so probably we need to abolish them or rethink how we can work them. Yes, that's maybe we could get more comments.
Yeah. So we're opening for another round of comments. Please do share your thoughts with us. You want to say something?
Mine is just maybe just an information that we're also in the process of applying, like renewing that permit. But I think I could say we are lucky, because when I made the last call to somebody who works there, he told me, whoever applied before the 1st, you may get your permit, because they're trying to get out all the permits. And then now, if you're applying now, after 1st, that's when you'll have issues, because actually for them also, they're not certain how they're going to be working. That's what I wanted to share.
Okay, thank you for that contribution.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to Peter for that elaborate learning, sharing, really. So for me, I would just like to share an experience because we work in the West Nile districts. And I do remember when we were getting our memorandum of understanding with Zombo district local government, it dragged for quite a very long time. And what we noticed is that for you, at the time we were getting the permit, the MOUs, we needed to first submit the draft MOU to be sent to Arua district, to the Solicitor General. So you can imagine, for me to just get an MOU in a district like Zombo, we needed to still have to wait for Solicitor General to look through whether we were worthy of getting that MOU. So I think it's also something that maybe we can as well look further into. Thank you.
Yes, Martin.
Thank you. Me, I just wanted to say something, just one thing. Kind of over-regulation of the sector.
Martin, we are losing you. We're not hearing you so clearly.
I'm saying, in light of the over-regulation of the sector that we have spoken about, I know Dr. Sarah talked about it in her opening remarks, and Peter at some point in his presentation. I mean, in light of all that, the conversation around self-regulation, I probably revisit that conversation and show us as a sector showing the need for it and maybe even the capacity for us to regulate ourselves and show the government that we don't need to regulate. I think Peter is best placed to kind of respond to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, I think, Peter, maybe you would, then Sarah, I see your hands up.
Yeah, very much, Peter, for the presentation. During your remarks, you mentioned about a committee that sits 4 times, and there were roads approving permits. But in the rationalization, the amendment shows that the board will be done away with and it no longer exists. And I'm wondering, what is this committee? Is it defined by law? And can we know the membership?
Thank you so much, Peter, for that presentation. I think I'm going back to the objectives and asking, beyond contribution or participation in the review of the laws, to what extent will this research also be used to engage with donors? Because like you said, some of the requirements that you're required to fulfill make it very difficult for NGOs to operate. And it's important that donors are also made aware of this so that they can accommodate NGOs to the extent possible, but more importantly, that they can also be able to support NGOs in the process. Because many times you'll be applying for funding and they tell you, we do not finance any legal processes that you might be engaged in. We do not finance registration processes, which really is unrealistic, because then where do you expect the NGOs to get the resources to do that? And then maybe in the engagement with government, I know this is asking for a bit too much, but also looking at what will be the impact on the economy, on the communities where NGOs operate, on the democratic space, for instance, on the education sector and all that. Is there a way that this can also be, included, so that you're showing that the work that NGOs are doing actually complements and sometimes comes in to fill the gaps that exist where the government is not able to provide certain services, then the NGOs come and do and provide that. So if NGOs are not able to operate, if they're forced to shut down, what does that mean for the country as a whole? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can open the round later after you respond.
Thank you so much. I think the first comments were more around experiences. Let me stand. Were more about experiences, and I can tell you what you faced is what many others have faced. For example, the people in Zombo, the documents being sent to the Solicitor General in Arua. I don't know if any of you saw a notice recently from Attorney General's chambers talking about the contracts that have to be approved by Attorney General's chambers. It also had the section on NGO, which very few people understood. I also not sure if I understood it. Because it said something like, for these ones, you don't need to be approved by Attorney General if they are under the NGO Act. But then the Attorney General is like the overall, so it's a bit confusing. Yeah, but that shows how the many legal issues come in. Now, the conversation about self-regulation, it has been going on. Things we think we could advocate for to see how to move this. But also the interesting bit is that international level, it's only up to this year when Uganda was on the FATF grey list for money laundering. And one of the things that FATF has been asking Uganda to do is to promote self-regulation for NGOs. It's a standard being applied across the whole world. It's something we've been trying to discuss. The problem is, when you look at what is in the NGO Act, it's not self-regulation. It's self-regulation by name, but not self-regulation. The Act is so detailed on how you should self-regulate. Like it says what documents you need, you should sign what, sign them, like not self-regulation. They're describing how you should self-regulate. Well, that's one of the things we intend to discuss in this literature. So, but the point about self-regulation shouldn't be lost as a solution to this. Hopefully, it will come up maybe as a recommendation. We don't know. We've not yet gone out there to the field to get data, but we are conversing. Now, about the committee, I wish I had a flip chart and I would write, because the ping pong with the amendment is quite interesting. Now, let's do this. So, let's look at what exists. What existed was the NGO Bureau as a semi-independent entity. Below the Bureau, the structure of the Bureau was, at the apex, it had a board. Below the board, it had the ED. Below the ED was a secretary. Below the secretary was a staff. That is how the structure was. Now, the amendment abolished the board, so you cross out the board. It kept the bureau. You get? The amendment also abolished the ED, so let's cross out the ED. The people who occupied the position as the board now called bureau. You get? So it was removed as NGO board, only renamed bureau. And these people, the law says the permit will be issued, permit, certificate, whatever, will be issued by the bureau. So it's this body of about 9 people called a bureau, basically renamed the bureau because it was a board, which will be issuing the whatever documents. Now this body sits at least 4 times in a year. Hope we've understood now how it comes about. So who heads it? Now, the present chair of the board, you know the NGO board, the board of the NGO Bureau right now, it has a chairperson, a vice chairperson, and members. It even has 2 representatives of NGOs. Now, the way it is, it has just been renamed Bureau. You get? It's just been renamed Bureau, and as transition, they will be doing that work until they appoint, or either they reappoint them or they replace them. So that's why at the beginning I said, when you look strictly at the law, they abolished it without abolishing it. They removed the board, then said, you people who have been sitting here as a board, from today onwards, we've abolished you. Then said, you people, you will be sitting from tomorrow onwards as a bureau. It's just same positions. They just changed the name. And then they said, okay, now the work that the ED used to do, which is issuing of permits and certificates and everything, will be done by you. You get? Now, this entity used to sit 4 times a year. You'll continue sitting 4 times a year. So if you are applying for a permit, you apply to exactly. So that's what I was saying. For ease of understanding, it's like there's a committee of 9 you apply to, and they look through your documents. And that's how it is. Now, that committee of 9 is helped by the secretary, who is a full-time employee. Remember, the other one was being helped by the ED, who was a full-time employee. And below the ED was a secretary. Now they removed the ED. So now this is helped by the secretary. So the only full-time employee on that is the ED, the secretary. But the only role of the secretary is to do the background work and give to these people to approve and pass and whatever. Yes. So, of course, the staff will continue. I will help the secretary into this. So that's how it came. About donors, it's a very good point. I don't want to answer for CCG, but what the long-term plan is really to engage the donors as part of the stakeholders. And I think even GIZ was supposed to be here. They're online, yeah. So the broader term is to engage the donors in these issues to see that this is how it goes. And also, we might have a section on the impact. And that section on the impact will also have aspects to talk to the donors. Because you as a donor, when you say, I should apply and have these and these. For example, you as a donor, you don't fund, you are only limiting my administrative costs to 30%. And I have all these legal issues I have to fulfill. They eat up my 30%. So we think and see like, yeah, your standard 30%, maybe it applies in Kenya. But in Uganda, your standard 30% is all I need for the legal costs. No other administrative work will be done. Also, not many donors are willing to fund, like to say, we have a law firm which is meeting our legal obligations. So the obligations are many, but then no one is giving you money to pay lawyers to do it. No one is giving you money to pay your own staff, to have that extra staff whose mandate is compliance. Because compliance has become so much, like we're giving an example. Deniva works countrywide. So if we had to file returns in half of in this country, probably our job would be filing returns. Because how many districts do we have? 100 something? So we'd be filing returns to like 70 districts times 3. That's how much? Yeah, so that is 221. So just if I'm spending a day on each, a year has 365. I'm spending 221 days. And the 365, if we remove it, so you see, like, it can be a full-time job. Yeah. Anyway, so this we need to understand, also discuss with the donors, and we see how they can support. Okay, let me see. The other one was... okay. I think these are the questions I was able to get. In terms of impact, we can't know much what impact this will cause. We are trying to put it as wide as possible. Once the report is out, we'll try to share it and simplify it as much as possible, because our long-term strategy is not just to put the report out. Our long-term strategy is to engage the existing processes. I've already talked about the policy review and the review of the laws, which is happening. And I've already hinted on the fact that even us, we don't know what impact this law has had. So we will use this to do more impact. In terms of impact of, for example, there is an impact, an undocumented impact. How many NGOs have been pushed out of business because of this law? That might need a whole research on its own to like assess how many were pushed out of, how many have closed because they could not fulfill these laws? How many jobs have been lost in the process? How many citizens have failed to access services in the process? But as you can see, that would need might be a whole independent research where you need to document that. So we may not go into that, but if we got some impact, especially directly related to the law and the policy, we will have that.
Thank you very much, Peter. I don't know if we have the participants on the Zoom call joining us or sharing their questions with us. We would like to hear from them as well. If they can't speak, they can as well just type the questions or comments in the chat room, and then Rita, you could read for us. As we wait, let's hear from...
Thank you so much. My interest is just understanding the timelines, because how critical this conversation is and the impact it has to the work that we are doing also requires us to be very timely. It requires us to speed up so that we can counter the attack that is in our space. I appreciate the fact that, of course, we are taking on the processes to negotiate and advocate with all the stakeholders that are concerned in this. But my interest with this is the timeline. When are we doing this? Because I know, as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs now introduces, taking the Bureau to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and dissolving the NGO Bureau, it is expecting that definitely we'll have some things about it, and we are quiet.
which actions and when are we doing it so that we can counter and perhaps maybe kind of address some of the emerging issues quite so fast? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Question of timelines. Rita, do we have? Not yet.
Thank you so much. Just experience sharing. I want to begin with what Dr. started with in her welcoming remarks, the issue of freezing bank accounts. I think it is real, it's happening, it's happened to us, and maybe many other organizations out there. Now, just like they say, that if you can't beat them, you join them. I think it's time to have the banks and those kinds of institutions in our engagements, because maybe they don't know what or the impact or the effect of their actions, and maybe when we engage them into these discussions, into these meetings, and we bring them to light, maybe it could change. And of course, they may be doing this in maybe they are protecting their maybe interests or their permits as well, or that. But if we bring them to light and we have these engagements, maybe we can understand each other and we can do well going forward. Then the other aspect is the issue of the physical. I think Doctor also hinted on it. You see, previously, the Bureau has been, it's been like an ordinary process dealing with the Bureau. But now, based on where it is now situated, it's a bit fierce, because now you imagine this is a security, it's a bit securitized, and not everyone has that courage to engage the ministry. So what is likely to happen is people are likely to give up. Some civil society organizations are likely to give up, unless it is digitized and we come to the online, this online thing like the URSB is doing things. Otherwise, we shall see civil society organizations shying away, dealing with the security, security apparatus under the Ministry of Internal Affairs. They may not have a problem, but ourselves, we may feel like there is a problem, and at the end of the day, you fall off. So what is likely to happen is that we may also need to engage government in one way or the other. If there are these meetings, we invite them, and we put it to their faces, and we try to show them the impact, and we try to show them the contribution. We try to bring out the meaning of NGOs and why are NGOs here? What do NGOs do? Maybe some are doing these things and they just hear about NGOs, but they have not appreciated the impact of NGOs. We could maybe make a reference of the, like 2 years back when one of the premier donors left, and the effect it had on the tax base in this country. I think it was a bit sounding, and maybe we could relate to that. Could show government that actually NGOs are contributing so much to the tax base of this system, and maybe at some point we could speak somewhat a similar language. So I think we shouldn't avoid them. We should bring them and put it to their faces and see how we can move forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Online team, not yet. Okay. I don't know if Peter would like to just another comment. Okay, please.
Came late. My name is Aloyo Nyeko Omega. I work at FIDA Uganda. I communicated that I would come in late, but still, my apologies. So, mine are just really few thoughts scattered. I hope they will make sense. But the rationalization of the NGO Bureau, the question has to start from who has oversight of NGOs in Uganda. Most of the work that we are doing is under the Ministry of Gender, right? It's work to the Ministry of Gender. So if you're working with children, you're working on political issues, but then how comes it's the Ministry of Internal Affairs that has oversight over you, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs is its primary role is ensuring that there is internal peace and stability in the country. So in essence, you're just trying to say that NGOs are posing a political risk in the country. So for me, that would be a starting point, just even on the oversight. I don't know the broad purpose of what an inception report, but it's sort of like for the study that will be done, no? So that would be a great starting point, oversight of NGOs in the country. If it is the Ministry of Internal Affairs, if it is the Ministry of Internal Affairs, so where is that disconnect? Because when we are having issues regarding the operations of non-government organizations, we are usually channeled to the Ministry of what? Of Gender. So that could be a great starting point. In the report, as I was reading through, you can see the trends that there is an attack on NGOs in the country. And I don't know maybe if this particular act is in preparation for the forthcoming elections and the role that NGOs could have in that particular election. So for me, that would be something that should also come out in the report, that we are in turbulent times. And if you're getting this institute that is supposed to regulate fighting for the human rights of others and putting them under the Ministry of Internal Affairs and taking away the executive director and a secretary. And of course, if you want it, a bureau is an administrative body. So if you're just an administrative body within a broader ministry, it means you must align with that ministry. So in essence, who is actually going to be? The law is just I don't know, sort of something is missing, and there is a very huge gap. In previous regulations, when you go through the inception report, you would see that NGOs have been closed for you have to get some sort of permission from the RDC. So who appoints RDCs in this country? So if you're not in tandem with resident district commissioners and their power, as opposed to working with the district local government. So it's almost like we have this decentralizations in this country. We have the decentralization that is constitutional, and then the watchdog sort of decentralization. I know of a few NGOs that have had challenges with and even before with the NGO Bureau before. So institutions like Frown Initiative, they offer psychosocial support to rape victims. So you would wonder why such an organization is having issues registering and just. So for me, that's extremely anti-NGO. Even in the inception report, when you make reference to the Bureau coming for what they would call loose associations, I don't know if that space has become so supervised that even the work that we think we are doing, in fact, we could do much more. So high fees, high fines. So it's neat. So the saving of that, they're saying that government is going to save 1.1 billion with this move, which is not bad. There are ways money is wasted in this country. Something that I feel and maybe later on in the program I see that there will be a way forward. But this is an extremely political move. We are going for elections. We've seen organizations come up and speak about some of these issues, whether it is women's rights, whether it is I remember the speaker said that NGOs are a place that homosexuality money is brought into the country. she could be right, she could be wrong. If the research can show us great examples of how money has been laundered and how these people have been taken to court and actually being charged. So for me, the starting point for the research that I would like to see is who is actually watching the NGOs in this country, yeah, and what is the politics behind the dissolution, which has already happened. So we are actually under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and we have to comply with internal peace and security. So where is the misalignment? Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Rita, we had. They went off. Okay. Yeah, they can just type.
And nowadays NGOs are like the process of registering NGO is very difficult, and even maintaining the one that you have, it is also difficult. For my case, I have two issues. First issue is about you. Like previously, the CBOs were working in the whole district. But for now, if you're a CBO working in the whole district, they need you to register at the national level. That they are saying that are no longer CBO. You must register it as an organization. A CBO that you must supposed to be working in one or two sub-counties. Then the second thing, like if previously my organization, it was called UNAC. UNAC, it was Uganda National Association of Persons with Cerebral Palsy. But after the last year, they told us that you might change the name. Now we are called Umbrella Cerebral Palsy Network Association, and that one can normally confuse a lot of people, especially whenever you have been in Uganda and you went out and you come back, you can feel there is a lot of confusion, and that one can then it can lead also to resist against the petition. They changing the bank account, the name to what, supporting those names of changing the name. I think that those are my submission. Thank you for giving me this platform.
Thank you, Robert. Just to repeat for the rest of us in the room. Number one, he raises the issue of the CBOs that are working in the whole district used to register at district level, but they now are required to register as organizations operating at a national level. And the other point of concern was about the request to change names. Their organization was requested to change from the name they were using. And first, that causes confusion between their partners and the people they were working with. And also, a lot of work is involved in finding the supporting documents for change of names. There's something else
from Martin Morris Okoli, chairperson, TESO Initiative. I think he was just introducing himself. Wait. In other, I'm trying to read their chats. Sorry. There's feedback. Our position should be that NGOs should be regulated by a single ministry rather than the current arrangement of 3 or more ministers. Imagine that in Uganda, government contributes. Oh, I think I lost him again. So there is feedback in the chat box. I kindly request you to unmute. You all have rights to unmute. And Yusuf Makweta, please speak. Yusuf Makweta, we are waiting. Okay. For clarity, we have a team joining us virtually via Zoom, so that's why you see us trying to reach out to them. Martin Morris, would you like to speak? Please go ahead. Yes, sure.
Thank you. My name is Martin Morris Okolo. I'm the chairperson of Initiative for Peace. We're located in Soroti. My submission is, suggestion is like this. If CSOs, if government is contributing 15% of the national health sector budget, and the private sector contributing 48%, and the balance is the NGOs. And yet the same NGOs are having their operating space being narrowed more and more, despite being service providers in other sectors. We could be, as a platform, we could be looking at a situation where we are lobbying for a single ministry regulating our operations, to make life easy for the CSOs to operate. Having a multiplicity of regulators behind us and before us or besides us, it makes life very difficult, and it is taking so many CSOs, so many service providers out of the service. That makes it makes issues of poverty and other areas that we have been trying to address even worse for a country like Uganda. Where we're having very little resources, meager resources, that is coming from the national government. It's my request that we push for that we have a single ministry regulating us, and all this multiplicity of requirements that we're supposed to fulfill will reduce if it is a single ministry regulating us. That is my opinion. Thank you.
Thomas Okiria. Please unmute and speak.
Thank you so much. My name is Thomas Okiria, I'm Programs Manager of Hope Foundation. We're based in West Nile region, that is in the Ivete refugee settlement. My submission towards this, first of all, I wouldn't want to call the whole confused, in a sense that, one, it is the same country that is advocating for localization, for arrangement of CSOs in the country. Now, I feel there's a little bit of contradiction in this, because if the same government is supporting this, the same government that is trying to downplay the actors. Now, my thinking could be, is there a lack of evidence of what local actors, or not local actors, what NGOs are doing on the ground? Or it is just a play to raise funding, to cause commotion, since we are heading towards elections? Maybe it's a fear of CSOs or international organizations I'm going to manipulate politics and all that stuff. But I believe if we can come together as a team and have a complete report showcasing the benefits, not the benefits, but what has been done on the ground by organizations, showcase, and we push on for the advocacy. Because if we don't, I know Uganda very well, it's good at policies, maybe after 3 or 5 years, it dies off, or it's all about to serve the interest of the government. But would secure our position if we come together and have a comprehensive report that this is the role that we're doing, this is how much we've contributed for the country, and this is how much we're selling the country internationally, and this is the quantity of funding that the country is getting towards the operations that we are doing. Because if you look at first of all, Uganda itself is not even funding its own budget. So you realize it is the international, the NGOs that are supporting the operation. So I would have loved if we can have an interim body that can have that comprehensive report by NGOs and NGOs, so that we can start from there, showcasing what we are doing. I think we shall fight together. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf Makweta. There's a message from Robert Mugisa. I thank Mr. Peter Magela, all partners and CCG for this information and for the meeting. I request that we work towards solidarity in making our legal and operational environment soft, and so as to continue achieving our set objectives. Let's capture all recommend and see if there is a plan to have them implemented and achieved. Oh, okay. Okay, the rest is still part of his earlier submission. I think we have failed to hear from Yusuf, and I'm checking if the GIZ team is still online. I think they've dropped off. Okay, so we are back to Arch Apartments. Thank you so much, and in case you have something else to say, please use the chat box. We shall be reading your feedback. Thank you.
Peter, we have, okay. Let's one comment and then we.
Something small to share. Someone online had said, is there no evidence of the work that NGOs are doing? It's a question that I also keep. We are doing in this country. It's almost pro bono. It's pro bono in its nature, but it's not centralized into the government work. So NGOs that are working in gender-based violence, NGOs that are working in health, sexual violence, people that are working with the police, receiving complaints. I know at FIDA we receive complaints. So all this work that we are doing is being given to donors in a donor report. It is not centralized in any way, in any government system, to show that this is the contribution of NGOs. So even the reports that we get from government, I don't know how accurate they are. If truly, because we're always complaining, the resources that are allocated to social justice work, health work, these things are little. If there is a disconnect between the budget that you're being given by the Ministry of Finance to do this work and the other people doing this work, and you're not incorporating their results in a legal way. If the police crime report were to say that this and this is the amount of cases that we receive from legal aid service providers, this is how they are being concluded. So all those voices are sort of captured and put into the national database. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there is it is captured in a national database to the tune, then we would not be having such dissolutions. It is because, partly, I do not know again, I think it is because if this information was captured, it would be difficult to deny the role that NGOs are doing, and it would be very difficult to say that we are just halo angels flying over the country and helping out a few suffering people here and there. A good example, if you went to refugee settlements, the work that is being done by just NGOs there, in terms of capturing how many people are undergoing sexual violence, what is the true state of affairs, then we wouldn't be having this resolution, because we would sort of be in a national system, but we are sort of, we enjoy some sort of dual citizenship. We are part of the government, but then we are also not part of the government. We have this very beautiful friendship that is extremely to our detriment, because if the government decides to, we are not legal wives, we are like cohabitants in a marriage. So we are all working towards the same goal, but our input is not appreciated legally. It is okay for it to be appreciated, to have government ministers and permanent secretaries come and speak at your functions, but if your input is not being put into their systems, then this is why we are having dissolution. First of all, if that input is put in, you're going to have the true state of affairs in this country, which is another sad story. Someone had shared also about CBOs, and I remember Rita had said that CBOs are now going to be organizations operating at a national level. No? That's also in itself an issue, because the whole point of a community-based organization is to encourage some sort of mobilization within the community. You've seen a problem, you don't have to go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs to get documentation to help students in Luzira Secondary School. So even the battle of NGOs in this country is going to be extremely difficult if you don't even have a CBO anymore. So yeah, that should be it. On the issue of shifting oversight, there will be no board of directors. I don't know who will be the board of directors in the new NGO world, because ordinarily a board of directors is supposed to advise, and in the previous NGO Act, you had even members of NGOs that have served for 10 years. Should it be 10 years? I think 10 years. That have served for 10 years that are part of this board of directors. So now, who is the board of directors? Who is going to guide? If your new boss is the permanent secretary, who is answerable to the minister, who is appointed by an appointing authority? So this yeah, so that's it really.
Let me, Peter, as you respond, I see you also take a historical approach. And I also wanted, if you could highlight the role, historically, the role of non-governmental organizations in providing, in complementing government efforts. Because you talked about religion, which, and you know very well that we had schools in Uganda that are Anglican. King's College Budo, Gayaza is also Anglican, Mount St. Mary's Namagunga. Then in 1952, we have Governor Cohen. In fact, by the way, before government, I think non-government organizations took care of the country. That should actually be highlighted. So it is important to maintain that relationship and not disconnect the relationship. Because even when you look at the education sector, it was non-state actors that were providing that educational services. Until we see in 1952 when Governor Cohen comes up with, I'm talking about the education sector. In 1952, we see Governor Cohen come up with schools that are now government aided. And those schools, we know them. It's like, you'll find schools like Nyapea, Kabalega, you know, those schools. The intention was because government actually realized that they were not making any contribution whatsoever towards education. And so its education sector was actually being run by non-government organizations which promoted, and in this case, faith-based, and they promoted those faith-based. So as they were moving towards to independence, They needed to have schools that would breed independent-minded people ready for independence. So I think we need to actually underscore some of these things, because Ugandan government is nothing without non-governmental organizations. And so for political purposes, it is not proper for them to now begin trying to turn away from what had actually been a long history of relationship that helped the citizens.
Okay, thank you so much. The first question was on timelines. This is to be done in 2 months. We've already done about, this is the third. The report has 2 months. The comment on engaging others, field NGOs have engaged. Just last week there was a meeting with the minister and commissioner for URA nearly every week. Yesterday I returned from Umbale where we were having the NGO Bureau. It's not like NGOs haven't engaged. They've really engaged with whoever is there. But we risk missing the point. It's not that government doesn't know what NGOs want or what NGOs are doing. They know everything. I'll handle this with the question about reports. It's not that government doesn't know. Every year we submit reports to the NGO Bureau, to FIA, to URSB, showing what we've done. You submit them to the districts, you submit them to the sub-counties. You have also, sometimes you have to even take there your MOUs with the donor before you can even access your money. So it's not like they don't know. All that information is there. They know. And they are doing it different. You get lost in thinking that they don't know, so you're going to give them this information. They know the information. Their target is totally different. That's why, despite them knowing the information, they are doing what they are doing. Now, about the issue of the location of the Bureau, I want to clarify. The location of the Bureau is not going to move. It will stay where it is. Kingdom Hall, something. They will stay in the same place. It's just an office, yeah, like she says. Also, the fact that the Bureau is under Ministry of Internal Affairs is not new. Just like I explained that the 2010 policy also says that. So it's not like they've just taken us to that ministry. We've been in that ministry. And for more than 20 years, NGOs have advocated to be removed from that ministry, and it hasn't happened. So if we're approaching the change, we need to approach it from that background, knowing that since 1989, when the first law was made, NGOs were under that ministry for a reason, security. So as you advocate to be removed from that ministry, that's that. And I'll handle that with another comment that talks about several ministries. If the paperwork, NGOs under one ministry, Ministry of Internal Affairs. The others are regulators. Just like you were a bank, you'll be under Bank of Uganda and might be Minister of Finance. But then, because you're a company, you'll be regulated by the Register of Companies. And because maybe you operate a certain business, probably the local government might need a license. You get. So that's how it works. The only difference is, let me say, for a license from Bank of Uganda, You don't need a license from the district. So your Bank of Uganda, the license from Bank of Uganda is enough for you to work anywhere in the country. Now for us, let's say Bank of Uganda is the NGO Bureau. So you have NGO Bureau license. But on top of that, you'll need some sort of license in quotes, which is an MOU, for each district where you want to work. And that's where the problem comes. Who does oversight? Definitely Ministry of Internal Affairs and the NGO Bureau. About rationalization, actually, if you checked in the news, government is going to spend 27 billion to rationalize entities. That is to pay workers who have been rationalized. It is value for money, I don't know, but that's what it's going to be. Economists might need to do an assessment of that. I like the comments about CBOs, and as you notice, our discussion didn't say much about CBOs, but we have them in mind as well. There is a move to re-register all CBOs in the country. I think that should be beginning in about a month's time. Because about 2 months back, there was a launch of CBO registers, which many of us attended. And then all CBOs have to be re-registered. The good thing is they're trying to centralize, because nowadays, a CBO, you go to this sub for something different, another one, to standardize that. The bad thing is, it's going to come at a cost. So as a CBO, you need to put your papers in order so that you can do it. Yeah. Same thing happened to NGOs anyway. They did validation. We had to resubmit our documents afresh. So that's coming. And also the issue of names. The issue of names is really an absurdity that in the law. The person who said they were forced to change names. I didn't want to go to this because it's not part of the assessment, but let me explain. If you're a CBO, your name is not registered anywhere because you're not a legal person. It will be registered at the district, but that is just like you can call your friend a name that you use between yourselves as Bades, but it can never appear on that person's national ID or official documents. It's just like that. So which means if you're a CBO and you have that name, I can start a company and use that very name, even if you've used it for 50 years or 100 years. I can start a company and use that very name. And I can still, the moment I register it with the Register of Companies, I can still come to you and say, please, drop my name. You cannot say, I've had this for 100 years. It's an absurdity coming from the fact that CBOs are not legal entities. So there is a solution in the law. Very few CBOs are taking it because very few CBOs use lawyers anyway. The solution in the law is to register the name as a business name because you're not a legal entity as a CBO, so you cannot have that. Of course, this tried to happen. The only thing is that people were reserving the names instead of registering the names. So when you reserve the name you reserve lasts 30 days. So you reserve the name, go home, knowing you have the name. It expires, no one comes to say it has expired. So you keep continuing, you bring your things. And then someone else 2 years down the road comes and takes the name. And then you say, but I have these documents, and the documents expired long ago. So that's, of course, it comes from the failure to understand the difference between reserving a name and registering a name. But that's, I'm talking you a bit into legal technical. So that's that. Another issue that happened then is because of the law changes in the law, the 2006 amendment made NGOs legal persons. So some NGOs would go straight to the NGO board and register and become legal entities. The 2016 change removed that. Now, NGOs which had been registered at the Bureau, incorporated and registered at the Bureau without going to the company registry, found themselves not having their names because that was removed and you needed to go to the company registry and start afresh. Now, some of those, when they went to the company registry, the name was not available to them, either because of the standards required for a name, like it shouldn't be offensive, it shouldn't look like you're promoting a government entity. That's why you have, for example, most of what were district NGO forums are now struggling because if, for example, you were, let me use Kampala, doesn't, okay, Wakiso District NGO Forum, you can't register that name because the Register of Companies will tell you that name sounds like you are a local government entity. So they will tell you to drop the word Wakiso or drop Wakiso District. So you'll find you've been calling yourself Wakiso District NGO Forum for the last 30 years. And you wake up one day and they say, no, 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 no. Since you are coming to register with us, look for another name. Of course, it affects branding, it affects many other things, but still there is a way somehow we've managed to tinker with some of the names as lawyers, register them as trademarks. Some are accepted, some are not. But there's a lot of things. There's a lot of legal things which have to go on. The unfortunate bit is few NGOs, few CBOs engage lawyers when they are doing this. So they will not appreciate that. Also, the other unfortunate bit is like 99% of the lawyers in this country are focused on commercial law. So they may not even appreciate the difference between a CBO and an NGO, which should be a basic thing. So it becomes hard. Yeah, but those are a bit outside our focus. We shall focus on CBOs. We are concerned, for example, the policy limits the work of CBOs to the sub-county. And it's possible at the time the CBOs, the policy was being made in 2010, a sub-county was a big deal. Today, one sub-county is one district, which means the district was divided further into smaller sub-counties. And then you find, as a CBO, I've seen CBOs where if we go strictly by that definition, you find if they cross the main street of a certain town, they will be in a different sub-county or a different division. For example, I've seen that in Gulu, like Peche and that's this other one. Yeah, they are separated by a street, which means if you just go the other side, you've crossed your boundary. Because the thing is saying work only in one sub-county. If you cross that street, those who come from Gulu know. But it cuts across, even if you picked any other. So our concern in this is because the policy limits. Yeah, same applies with Arua, actually, I've been saying. And worse still now, when Arua was created into a city, I've seen situations where they say, your permit says you work in Arua district. What are you doing in Arua city? You go to the district. But your offices are in Arua city. So, because by the time they created the division, you are already operating. And so they are telling you, the option you have is to go back to the bureau, change your permit to allow you to work in Arua city. No. The district is independent and those are two local governments. So you find yourself, because of a small administrative change, they are saying you're not following your permit. They are those ones. Then the other thing is the issue about localization and the law. I have some reservations on the way the whole localization thing has been done, and I don't. Localization has been a move by the international organizations to involve more of the local entities, if I can use that. And I think it's being promoted under Charter for Change, and the major drivers are the people who are doing relief. And government picked it up. And recently, I think one of the first meetings I saw was organized by OPM, which was an OPM meeting for localization. Well, that's good. My only reservations are when we are being organized by OPM, then that's why I started with my reservations. Like, okay, if the government is the one dictating for me how I should localize, I need to have some question marks. But then there is the law as well. So you will localize, but the law will still define you as foreign. That's where I began, that the policy and the NGO Act says, if, for example, we are 700 members of the NIVA, among the 700 are two Britons or Americans, two Americans. The law, the permit will be issued, will say, we are not local. It will say we are foreign. Just because on our system there. So there is also that aspect of the law. And I don't know, maybe the promoters of localization might need also to look into that. Because the permits you will be carrying will still be putting you outside of the country. You might be, in practice, you might be here, but you are somehow a foreigner. Working towards solidarity, I think I've seen quite a lot of NGOs working towards solidarity. And I don't think it's the lack of solidarity that we have this kind of law. I was in the review of this. There's a point where I tried to review, which I don't know if I will put in this, but there's a whole section I had dedicated to the work NGOs did in the build-up to the 2006 amendment, the build-up to the 2016 amendment, and all that. There's a lot of work that went on. I can tell you personally, I was even on the drafting committee representing NGOs. So in terms of solidarity, there is solidarity. What happens, I remember 2006, for those who were around, there was something called CONOB. CONOB was a coalition on the NGO bill. It began in around 2003. It worked. There was even an NGO bill anyway, which was different from the bill that government had presented. And many things happened. I don't want to go into that. Many things happened. Because at one stage, even NGOs wanted to present their bill as a private member's bill. And the powers that be wouldn't allow that. And it didn't happen. So in terms of solidarity, there is a lot of solidarity. But, you know, the solidarity that is there is like for us lawyers. Now, for us lawyers, if you found me with Sarah in court, probably we might think we are the worst enemies because we are in court. And then we step out and we go for tea together. So you wonder, like, but these people have just been going after each other. A few moments back, how are they able to sit and take tea? Now, that's the relationship that NGOs have with government. You'll sit with any government agency. I've seen in this country, even NGOs meeting the president. But that doesn't stop the government from squeezing you. You get? So the solidarity is there, but because the intent is different. So if, for example, we wanted to launch a school, we can call the highest person in this land and he'll come and launch it. And he'll sing praises for you. If he really feels like he should say something, he might even say, yeah, you are good, you are launching a school, but there are those others which are not you who are promoting homosexuality. But that doesn't mean you have solidarity that tomorrow they will make a law that will be good. The problem with laws, and this is the situation that happened with the religious leaders, is the law is made for everyone. So the last time when we were making the NGO Act, the minister promised the religious leaders to be soft on them for the law, so that he can be hard on NGOs because of all those. But the law never said religious institutions are exempt. So when the law came to enforcement, we were all in the same boat. But there had been solidarity in terms of condemning the rest of the NGOs that are not religious, how they are bad and everything, how they promote whatever. So we just need to understand that. And the last comment is on the historical role. I try, when you read the actual report, you'll find the historical role is there. And that's why I was talking about how, you see, NGOs did not start as NGOs. In Uganda, they began as informal things like Bulungi Bwansi, those ones. So I tried to trace it right from that. Before colonialism, there was that voluntary work in every community where people would do for the good of the whole community. It came to after World War I, when that becomes formalized. I've only not talked about one law for obvious reasons. It's because in 1966, because of what was happening in this country, they made a law that made that voluntarism hard. That is I think it's called Public Collections Act. They made a law which stopped people from collecting funds publicly. It's still a law up to now, not enforced, but it's still a law in Uganda. So the Public Collections Funds was made, of course, to control the Baganda who were collecting money to give it, to send it to the Kabaka, who had been exiled. So they made a law and said you cannot publicly collect funds in Uganda unless you have permission. So that killed the whole voluntary NGO kind of thinking. But that law had targeted one person, and that law is still in force. Not enforced, but still in force. I don't know if we should go into that, but you can see the history still was not straightforward. It has been up and down. One thing, they throw a law at you. Another point, they are not acting on it. Another point, they throw another law at you. It has been like that. And we seem not to have learned from that history. Surely we haven't. As we move forward into these other reforms. So those are the responses. Okay, just one thing. Rita, the person who commented about CBOs, if they have any challenges, maybe you could share with that person my contacts. Then we could, outside this, because it's not part of the research, we could see how we can provide them with the pro bono support.
Please unmute and speak. As we wait for colleagues online to pick up to our speed, I think I'll hand over to Judith for, yeah.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you to our online participants, and also thank you very much to every one of you who has made a contribution to this conversation. The next item on our program is for us to now talk about the next steps. I know Peter has made it clear that the report will be out in 2 months. So that means we're having another conversation probably around early December, right? But as we proceed, I would also like to hear from you all. How do we move now? Ideas on the next thing, the next step we should take, once we have the report, or even before we actually have this finalized. If you have any suggestions or recommendations, please share. I would like to hear from you. Henry, I haven't heard from you. Simon, the lady behind.
Thank you so much, Judith. And thank you so much, CCG, for this initiative. There have been a lot of efforts from the government to frustrate the NGO sector. And we haven't had much of these kind of discussions where they are dying silently. Thank you so much. I may not have a clear next step structured, but I think that's what actually was going to be my first question. So what is this leading to? Like, what would be the real outcome of this project? What are we looking at the end of it all? But among the recommendations, could we see that at least the NGOs are consulted and represented in such amendments to the NGO Act, to the NGO policy, to such kind of rationalizations? Can the NGOs be represented? Can our voices be heard? Can our contributions be taken into consideration when such kind of revisions are being made? I've heard statements like nothing for me without me. So at least can they consider us when they're making such kind of changes? Okay. Then on the thing of the line ministry over the oversight, we know we have been under the Ministry of Internal Affairs for the past 20 years, but maybe could this be the beginning or the starting point for us to awaken that call and ask those questions? Why are we under the Ministry of Internal Affairs and not under the Ministry of Gender? Because when we are registering and looking for permits and all that, they send us back to the line ministry to get the recommendation, and that is the Ministry of Gender. So why then is the oversight and the administrative work and all that being done in the Ministry of Internal Affairs? Maybe this should be our starting point to awaken that discussion and recommend that we be shifted back to our line ministry, which is the Ministry of Gender. And then on the permit, maybe we could push for something like, if we have the permit by the NGO Bureau or the board, whatever case it may be at this point, would that be enough for us to be allowed to operate where we are? Why should I have a permit and then I need to get another small permit from the district, then a small, most especially the permit from OPM? Why are we again pushed, especially those of us who are operating in the districts that have refugee settlements? Again, you're pushed to go and get another permit. You get an MOU with the OPM. Again, you are supposed to get an operational permit to allow you enter a settlement. When I have the overall permit given by the NGO board, maybe among the recommendations we could ask that that permit should be enough. And maybe we have an entry inception meeting with the district and all other stakeholders in the district and tell them about our project and what we've come to do, but not seeking for permits and MOUs.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've highlighted 3 issues. NGOs should be consulted and represented in issues, especially when it comes to amendments of the law and so on, and also have a conversation to have the oversight responsibility moved to Ministry of Gender and not Internal Affairs. As Sarah, we are now discussing the next steps, the way forward, just to bring you up to speed. Who we have somebody else?
Thank you so much. Lydia Nairobi is my name, from Uganda Network. Apologies, I came in late, but I had issues in finding the exact location. Mine is a that can NGOs take a deliberate move to in trainings and compliance measures? Because when we look at what is coming up now, like Councillor Peter highlighted, is the issue of funds. So at times, even when we are caught at the wrong side of the law, we don't even have actual capacity to remedy what has gone off. So can we deliberately invest in trainings, especially on compliance Last year we had a training, and Peter was one of our resource persons on NGO compliance. And we targeted majorly the EDs and CEOs of these organizations. But you'll be shocked that most of these people don't know these things. Apart from having a permit and a certificate to operate, they don't know things beyond that. Peter was in shock when they were asking for people that have been filing returns, and they are not even aware whether what they've been doing was filing returns or something else. So I would think that as can we also take the deliberate move to invest in training and probably supporting CBOs or CSOs at district level on issues of NGO compliance.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Your neighbor.
Thank you for the responses. Mine really is just a general comment. It would be to, as we undertake the research, we have an end in mind. At the point when maybe the research will be done, probably there will be a bit of clarity in the NGO Bureau and where the current confusion that is there. And so I think that the outcomes of the research should aim at influencing or informing policy directions, especially with foreseeing what's likely to come in the next days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mine on the way forward would be that we need to do some advocacy around.
Could you say that again?
Advocacy around recognition of NGO data. So all the data that we are tirelessly working to collect, we need to engage government agencies. It used to be called Statistics House.
UBOS. Yeah.
Uganda National Bureau of Statistics of Standards and Statistics. Yeah. So engaging UBOS to see how do they capture our information into the national database. And also to make sure that these conversations on recognizing our data, are they also making sure that our data is up to national standards? For example, if you want to feed into the police system, what M&E structures, monitoring and evaluation to make sure that the data coming from NGOs is meeting the highest, it hits the mark of what contributes to a crime according to government. So these are conversations that we need to be having around data. And with that legal recognition of our data will come structure, because then government will be not forced, but government will have to start saying, okay, these NGOs, which line ministries does their data feed into? Is it Ministry of Health? Is it the police? Is it? But it all starts with data. We're just having information flying like rain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There was, here, then we come to Henry. Let's start.
I don't know whether this works for us, but I would also think in the next discussion, maybe we could have a representative from government so that they hear our recommendations verbatim, because at times when somebody hears it like from the source, they can make commitments. Because what I also know with Africans, we are not good at reading. So when they hear from the right source, I believe commitments can be made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, let me first hear from Henry, then we get back to you.
Thank you very much. I had chosen not to speak. I just wanted to listen.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I radicalize people. So, yeah, so this is what I think. You know, the tendency is to think that government does not know these things. That, they want to regulate us. All those things we're seeing, the shenanigans they're pulling on are just to make sure they control you. And let me tell you, my sister, for as long as you've not engaged in anything that threatens them, they'll still give you your permit, they'll still give you your what, until you cross that line. But having said that, I remember the meeting we had with the minister. He seemed to be sober enough. I think, and that means I'm referring to is the Deputy Lieutenant General Muhoz. He seemed to be sober enough. For example, there are those processes of amending, when they amended the act to, to rationalize, but also the regulations to enforce the rationalized things. They were never consulted. But he said it's never too late. Bring your proposals. So I think going forward, we need to agree that we need to continue having discussions of this nature. Of course, when Peter was laying out a roadmap, he clearly defined what we are going to do, when we're going to have a validation, what is done, blah, 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 to continue engaging and not to give up. But I think, and lastly, I think we have to also learn to survive in contexts like these. Because these contexts will not change much. So I think we need to continue talking within ourselves to explore ways and mechanisms of coping and learning to exist within authoritarian tendencies. One of them is what I normally tell people these days, and sometimes I sound like, have you been co-opted? No, I haven't. So I think in a context like this, you are stronger when your approach is technical. And therefore, you work collaboratively with the technical wings of governments that work on your issue. Yeah, you have to think twice about the tone you use, but also the radicalism however angry you get at an issue, you need to think twice. So again, the bottom line is learning to survive and exist in these contexts like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then I also wanted us, sometimes when we talk about advocacy, we just stop at advocacy, but we do not break it down. So for me, I was actually saying that if we could, because advocacy is actually what NGOs do. And so if you've been doing advocacy all these years and you're still talking about advocacy, then it means the advocacy has not worked. So if there could be a change in strategy in advocacy. So I am actually proposing that since this time we have evidence, and this is going to be evidence-based advocacy, some of the issues in the report should actually be, you can actually take it to legislators. You know that coalition is also important. If they can inform some bills, some motions within those institutions like Parliament, I think it would also be important. And then also NGO leaders should need to at least also meet the chief executive of the country, like the president, and talk to him. Because the problem, because if you do not meet and talk to him, then, and we know he's the one who, even if you meet David Muhozi, David Muhozi really does nothing. Any minister in Uganda is just as good as an LC5 chairman. You see that? So I think for a fundamental change in the landscape, I think NGO leaders should one day first decide to say, okay, we have this evidence and memorandum that we need to meet the president over this particular matter. Me, I think that would actually work. Yeah.
Okay.
Something.
Please.
You see, the statement he makes can sound crazy. And someone on the surface can just brush it off. But again, as one of the ways of surviving in contexts like these, earlier on when I was still young, I remember watching a movie called Dancing with the Wolves. Sometimes you may want to dance with that wolf. Not necessarily when you know that I don't mean it. But you see, to also confuse the wolf. Eh? So I think I would agree with Christophe.
Yes. Can we have a few more contributions and then we call it a day?
Yes, so for me, continuing with such collaborations as NGOs, to have a concerted voice is so important and critical in such times. Maybe also ahead of time is also think about doing a joint presser perhaps as well, so that we can push and disseminate and also send our issues through the media as NGOs. And I also like the aspect of really having our advocacy engagements with the legislators. In the discussions, something came out to just highlight that those we think know the laws do not know the laws. So they cannot speak for us on the laws they do not understand. So really having a critical discussion with the legislator is so important for them to appreciate where our pain is, but also understand where the gaps are, speak about the gaps, and move with us in this journey. So MPs is a very great target for us to engage with and other key stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, it's yes, please.
Thank you very much for this wonderful discussion. Sorry, you had given me an opportunity earlier to talk, but due to technical issues, I went off. I would just like to appreciate CCG for organizing this platform that we are also participating. Me personally, as a women leader, we have been facing these challenges, especially as far as registration of NGOs is concerned. And with the new changes, in fact, most of the questions have been coming to us. And now that we have gotten this information, I just pray that we continue collaborating so that we continue getting more information for our communities, especially women and youths there who want to also start up their own NGOs and CBOs. We've been positioned to give them this information so that they do not get disturbed along their way. We know there are so many issues, like the issue of now gender, that are putting us in internal affairs, the issues of OPM. But I believe when we have this discussion like this, up to them into action. Something will come out that will help is members accessing the services. To me from Bali, we just appreciate always CCG for considering the most vulnerable people to also put them in these discussions and don't think about the well-being of our people. Actually, to me, myself, I call you for the voiceless because you bring out issues that affect people at the grassroots. I will always appreciate you, and big thanks and greetings from Bali City.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more feedback from the online group? Okay, so let me just run through what you have all shared. I noted about 12 issues. The first, of course, consult NGOs and ensure they're represented when in issues of amendments of the law and so on. Let's use this as a starting point for NGOs to, of course, push for the oversight role function to move to gender and not internal affairs. Also, issues of the permits we should push for clarity so that organizations are able to operate where they are, especially those at districts, upcountry. Also, NGOs should take a deliberate move to invest in trainings on legal issues and compliance. See how research outcomes, outcomes of this paper should inform policy directions. There's also an issue that was raised to have the need for advocacy and recognition of NGO data to be captured on the national data so that there's an appreciation of the contribution of NGOs in complementing government efforts in the different sectors in which we operate. Someone suggested that we should have a representative from government at the next engagement. Also, let's have these conversations continuously and provide policy alternatives to proposals such as RAPEX and so on. That was Henry, I think, saying we are stronger when we approach government, when our approach is technical in nature, as it captures the issues in a more succinct manner. So there's also a proposal that we should change our advocacy strategy. Some of the issues in the report should find a way to the policy-making arm of government. I think this is an issue that has also come up again. We should have more collaborations and speak with one voice. If possible, we do a joint presser and push for the issues which affect the sector. It's important for us to have a critical conversation with legislators, again, emphasizing the other issue. From our participant online cited challenges with registration of organizations and also emphasized that there is a need for more engagements and collaboration for members to gain more clarity and know how to operate in this environment. I think, ladies and gentlemen, I would say thank you very much to each and every one of you. Thank you to CCG for bringing us all together. Thank you very much, Council Peter, for this comprehensive report. We're looking forward to the final product, and we are hoping to have a more engaging conversation around that. And to each one of you, I can't express how grateful we are to have you here. We know people have a lot of priorities, but you chose to be here, and we don't take that for granted. We also appreciate so much your input, your input and contributions to this discussion. I think for me, my task is done for today. It is 12:40 p.m. I think we should now be breaking off for lunch. Yes, so you are all invited for lunch. You'll just find our team. There's someone out there who will give you further directions. Thank you.